Hey.
Hey everyone, you've joined me and David, two old men who are reminiscing about
Yeah.
the old days where Fridays in September were considered the slow news days, where you can kind of stroll into the office, there'd be a news dump, you'd prepare for the weekend. But nope, not in 2025, not when Donald Trump, a vulgarian and criminal, is the president of the United States of America, and Kash Patel, a conspiracy theorist with no law enforcement background, is the head of the FBI. And when people like Nick Fuentes and his Groiper army get 200,000 people on their live stream yesterday, and when we have mass shootings almost on a daily basis, and when this country seems to have lost its mind with a type of whitewashing and sanitization and hagiography of Charlie Kirk, we condemn the murder, we condemn political violence. You should be morally consistent on that issue. But Charlie Kirk, according to Ezra Klein, was practicing politics the right way. And I felt like bashing my head against the wall, like asking the world, has anyone read Charlie Kirk? Am I the only one? What are we talking about? And then thankfully, David Korn, the Washington, D.C. bureau chief of Mother Jones, the author of the excellent Our-Land newsletter, wrote a piece that was published yesterday, less than a day ago. No, Charlie Kirk was not practicing politics the right way because, like me, David has the receipts and he has been following MAGA and he has been following the radicalization of the Republican Party and right wing politics. And David, as we're now recording this at 1:42 p.m., the breaking news on that slow Friday is that Tyler Robinson is the alleged shooter who turned himself into his father. His father, formerly of law enforcement, detained him. Tyler Robinson, David, you'll be shocked by this. I'm just going to list some facts just to set the stage, and I'll give it to you. Is a white man, 22 years old, straight, not transgender, not immigrant, not person of color, Christian, comes from a Republican MAGA family, Second Amendment supporter, experienced firearms user, apparently a good son, no trouble with law enforcement, was law abiding until, of course, the murder, terminally online. The family are Blue Lives Matter, Second Amendment, Trump voters, Republicans. Father is an ex-sheriff. Yesterday, with too many outlets who apparently don't have any expertise in white supremacy, online white nationalist content, said, hey, there was things etched on the bullet such as "Hey, fascist, catch," up arrow, right arrow, three down arrows. Um, the manufacturer of the bullet is Truon, so some people thought it meant trans. Nope. Folks, those are, if you will, catchphrases or idioms associated with groypers, and we'll explain what that was. Tyler Robinson also, his mother posted a Facebook photo from several years ago where for Halloween he posed as Pepe the Frog, who is also an icon of these white nationalists and Christian nationalists and groypers. And so it wasn't a transgender individual. It wasn't a leftist. It wasn't an immigrant. It was Tyler Robinson. And the governor of Utah said, I wish it wasn't one of us, but it is one of us. And I think without realizing it, he said something really profound. The one of us. Yep. MAGA, Republican, one of us, white guy. We're going to find out a lot more. But Charlie Kirk, also, who said a lot of hateful stuff, was one of them. And there's a lot to unpack, David. But you wrote this article that came out yesterday. No, Charlie Kirk was not practicing politics the right way. His assassination deserves full condemnation. His full impact should not be sidestepped. With that, I yield the floor to you, David Korn. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'll start by saying that, I'm a reporter, so I'm still waiting for more details on the alleged assassin, which is how we should refer to him, before making any conclusions about his motivation. You just never know these days what is driving people to take such extreme action. But what we do know is the history of Charlie Kirk and other things. And yesterday in the morning, as we were all processing this, I saw this piece by Ezra Klein, the liberal columnist, the New York Times, whose work, I respect and appreciate, and I would say most times I agree with his perspective on things. Um, Saying, it was the headline of the piece was Charlie Kirk practiced politics the right way. And in the piece, Ezra talked about how Kirk was loved to debate people, was open, go to these college campuses like he did this week, and would take on all comers. That he was out there persuading people. He was in the public square, and he built a movement doing this, and that he envied the movement that he built, and he praised his moxie and fearlessness. Those were
Mm,
Ezra's words.
mm,
Now,
mm.
I can appreciate, Kirk going out there and putting himself out there for criticism and debate, from college kids and going on a podcast with Gavin Newsom and otherwise, of course, is part of his shtick and gives him, helps his publicity. And I'll say right now that, this event, I find incredibly tragic and frightening, and I feel for his family, his friends, and his colleagues. No one deserves this, and we all and it's an event. It's an event that deserves widespread denunciation and condemnation, and we should reflect what it means and what we can do to prevent acts like this in the future. But as he's being lionized
Mm.
by the right and by Trump, who's going to give him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, um, they're assessing his role in American public life, well, then it should be a full and complete assessment. And if Ezra is praising him, or at least, partly praising him, and Axios is out there calling him a champion of free expression, well,
Remarkable.
then
Remarkable.
yeah, I think the time is to do a full assessment here. And I start with a very simple point. He was one of the major proponents of the big lie. He was out there saying, that Trump, the election was stolen from Trump. He was involved in organizing. He helped organize the rally that preceded the Capitol Hill riot. He paid his group paid Kimberly Guilfoyle $60,000 to come before that crowd and give a very short speech. $60,000, not so bad, in which he said they stole our election. Of course, that was the rally where Trump went on for hours, it seemed, saying that the election had been stolen, and whipping up the crowd and inciting them to the riot. So here was the guy, and I do think that the big lie in January 6th broke American politics.
Oh yeah.
You had an American president who refused to accept election results and then tried to connive his way to retain power, and then ended up citing violence that included death threats against his own vice president and beating up 140 or so cops. And we have not recovered from that as a society. And Trump managed to even able to exploit that to get back into the White House. So Charlie Kirk was a big part of that. Much of his organizing was involved around these conspiracy theories and these baseless lies from Donald Trump. And then the other thing, he was an advocate for many causes, but he also made statements that I think charitably can be called racist, homophobic, anti-Islamic. He said Islam is not compatible with Western values. I'm sure you would beg to differ with that. He had this quote that was just really, really foul. That when he gets on an airplane and he sees a black pilot, he wonders if that person is qualified because of DEI and wonders if he should get off the plane. I mean, when Paul Pelosi was attacked,
Oh
he
yeah.
got out there and said, "You know what? There's something happening here." And he posed a whole conspiracy theory, and a patriot should bail the assailant out of jail. So his practicing of politics, well, again, I go back to the point I said it earlier. Admirable that he would get out there and want to, duke it out with college kids and come at me and all that stuff. I think that's a good thing for those who've had public life to engage with people that way. But his politics were based on deceit and bigotry.
That's right.
And you can't just separate that. You can't just say, well, he was an advocate of free expression without talking about what he freely expressed.
Openly,
And you
proudly,
can't,
consistently,
and
without
I was,
shame,
you
repeatedly.
know, and and I don't want to, I don't want to just dump on the New York Times here. They did a piece on his politics that got into his accusations of racism and anti-Semitism and homophobia and anti-Islam bigotry. They talked about that. They called them accusations, which is how they have to handle this stuff, rather than just saying he made racist remarks. I get that, but through the whole story about his political activity, not one mention of 2020 and the big lie and January 6th. And so, that is whitewashing. And what how Trump and the right are going to turn him into a martyr and
They
canonize
already
him.
did.
You
David, they
know,
already did.
and that's just going to keep happening. And they're going to use this event also to impede criticism of Trump. I mean, he's out there saying this already. That if one of the bullets, and again, I don't want to go too far down this because we don't have all the details. One or two of the bullets seem to have an anti-fascist message possibly attached to them. It doesn't matter what we're going to find out. They will use that information. One said, "Oh, Bel Ciao," Ciao, which is a wonderful song, folk song, for the Italian partisans who fought the fascists in World War II. But they're going to use that one bullet now to say that he, was an anti-fascist. So anytime you and I want to look at what Trump is doing in his actions and say, well, this looks like fascism to me or authoritarianism, they're going to say you are inciting domestic terrorism. So this is going to be broadly used to impede criticism of Trump. And earlier today, I'll finish with this point.
No, no,
Um,
well, just keep
yeah,
going. I have a
I'll keep
follow-up.
going.
Don't worry. I got
Um,
follow-ups too. I have
Okay.
receipts also, David. Continue.
Okay. Well, I'm watching other hearts going to see when people lose interest and the hearts stop. But earlier today, and I thought we can talk a little bit about what Trump said in his Oval Office address on Wednesday night, in which he said this is all, he only talked about episodes of political violence that targeted people on the right and didn't mention the killings in Minnesota, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the mass shootings in El Paso, Boston, and the Tree Life Synagogue, which seemed to be conducted, waged by people who had far right conspiracy notions that you can hear on Fox News and elsewhere. But and he said he made this one sided. But this morning he went even further on Fox and Friends, and I know you watch it every morning, so you saw this on Fox
I
and
know what you're
Friends.
talking about.
I thought, one of the hosts put him a kind of legitimate question to him, saying, "We see violence from the right, we see some violence from the left. Um, how do we deal with this?" And he basically said, "I don't care about violence from the right. When that happens, it's because people are mad about crime, about people coming here, immigration, about burning down shopping centers. It's the violence from the left that's evil and politically motivated and savvy, and that's dangerous." So you see what he's doing here. He is, basically excusing,
Yep.
if not encouraging, you know, um, political violence from the right, like January 6th, like when he told the Proud Boys, stand by, stand back. But he's saying that's not a problem. Political violence from the right is not a problem. And in fact, I kind of understand why they're doing this. And then if you put that in with what Stephen Miller, the kind, gentle, warm-hearted Stephen Miller, who's always looking to bridge gaps and cross political divides and heal the nation, said also on Fox on August 25th, he called the Democratic Party a domestic extremist organization. So they are, this is what this is what fascists, I'll use the word, do. They are setting up the political opposition to be evil, to be the threat from within, to be outside the bounds of legality. A domestic extremist organization is something that you eradicate. You don't cut deals with Congress. Um, and they're going to, make it so that so they're up in
David, you're cracking up a
their
bit. Your internet connection just went a little nutty.
rhetoric, and froze up on me, but now you're back, and now
Oh,
I see all those
okay.
hopes going
I
in.
see. Okay, okay. Go
Uh,
ahead. Continue.
yeah, yeah. So they're really rigging one of Trump's favorite words, rigging the deck here. We don't care about violence from the right. It's violence. It's the radical leftists who are doing this. And when Trump uses the term radical leftists, sort of in a Steve Million way, as he's used it in the past, it covers Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, every Democrat, every progressive, everyone who reads Mother Jones, everyone who subscribes to David Corn's newsletter, everyone who subscribes to your Substack, everybody who's pushing the heart button right now. This is the radical left for him. So I don't want to be um, hyperbolically fear mongering here, but I do worry. I am concerned that this tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk is going to be used to further promote their authoritarian impulse to demonize, vilify all their enemies, and find ways to curtail uh, criticism and expressions of opposition.
Uh, the hearts are still there for you, David. I will be a bit more blunt, and I will also bring the receipts. And I'll also say that you are not being hyperbolic because Donald Trump and the Republicans and right wing media, before any evidence, before any suspect, before any motive, jumped on and blamed, quote unquote, the left for Charlie Kirk's murder. Specifically, the quote that Donald Trump gave from the White House without any evidence or any suspect was the following: that liberal criticism of conservatives was, quote, directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now, end quote. The shooter, the alleged shooter, as we've said, so far, who turned himself in against the alleged shooter, is Tyler Robinson. Again, just some facts about Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter. White, straight, male, Christian, from a conservative background. His family is Republican, MAGA, Blue Lives Matter, Second Amendment supporter, experienced firearms user, apparently a good kid, no trouble with the law outside of, well, today. And from what we know, was terminally online, has used much of the language and idioms that are associated with groypers. Groypers, for those who don't know, well, you're going to learn a lot about groypers and Nick Fuentes. Groypers and Nick Fuentes are a white Christian nationalist movement that is online that, by the way, hated Charlie Kirk and said that he wasn't sufficiently anti-right enough. Nick Fuentes also has gone after Ben Shapiro. So within MAGA, there are schisms,
Mhm.
and they called, these are all facts. Groyper called Charlie Kirk a fascist, and some of the engravings on the bullets that allegedly the shooter used are also synonymous with the Groyper's language, and also a game like Helldivers 2. Helldivers 2 is a game where you're playing, against fascism and anti-fascist military, but Nazis and the right wing have co-opted the game and co-opted it with their own Nazi and pro-white supremacist ideology. Right? This is all that we know so far, folks. And what we also know, David, and I'm so glad you said this, is that Charlie Kirk openly and consistently had a rich history of bigotry against women, black people, immigrants, transgender people, Muslims, LGBTQ, promoted white nationalist conspiracies, promoted the January 6 conspiracies, right? Sided with the insurrectionists. Some of the stuff that I want to just bring some receipts that you also mentioned. Gay people should be stoned to death. Uh,
Mhm.
Leftists should not be allowed to move to red states. Religious freedom should be terminated. MLK Jr. was an awful person. Vaccine requirements are medical apartheid. The Civil Rights Act was a huge mistake. Mamdani winning in New York is a travesty because Muslims did 9/11. Muslims only come to America to destabilize Western civilization. Palestine doesn't exist. Those who support it are like the KKK. America should not have separation of church and state. This was all out there. All right, David?
Yeah,
You and me both.
in fact, as you were telling me this, and again, I'm a reporter. I, try to, be cautious, and you know, we saw early that the Wall Street Journal reported that he was the bullets referred to transgender ideology, which doesn't exist as a thing, but also may not be true. We don't know. So I'm just looking at this evidence we have. But someone just sent me something called a Groyper War playlist, which and the Groyper War might be a reference to their opposition to Charlie Kirk. And on that playlist, sorry for scratching my nose there. On this playlist, there is a remix of Bella Ciao, the
Yep.
anti-fascist song.
Yep.
So, who knows? Again, the guy's alive, which is a good thing. When we have these horrific events, I know there's a certain degree of dissatisfaction that the person kills themselves or maybe is shot dead by a cop. But I think to have a full understanding, it's better to have these people alive. We don't know what they will say or how they will describe themselves and what information there is that will be had. But clarity is always useful in a time of crisis.
Boy, David,
So
if I may, real quick, for those who are asking, and I'm so sorry that I know this and now you have to know this. I've been following it for a while because I've been following and researching right wing extremism for many years. Groypers, Groypers. We'll talk about it in a second. And number two, just following up what David said, irresponsible reporting by the Wall Street Journal and some of these people who promoted this debunked nonsense about transgender has nothing to do with transgender. I want to read this. This came out from yesterday, and I shared this instead of that article. According to the preliminary internal report circulated inside the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, federal and local officials recovered ammo with the shooter's rifle that appeared to be engraved with statements expressing transgender and anti-fascist ideology. But a senior law enforcement official with direct knowledge of the investigation cautioned that report had not been verified by ATF. Analysts did not match other summaries of the evidence and might turn out to have been misread and misinterpreted. And what we know today was yes, misread and misinterpreted, because now, and again, this is ongoing, as David said, our job is just to give you the facts. As this is ongoing, that same type of engraving and messages, many people who have been following Groypers are realizing, and the people who've been following it for a while, like, oh, that's Groypers. This is not anything, the anti-fascist language was also used by Groypers. Bella Ciao also used by Groypers. Groypers also called Charlie Kirk a fascist. The other engravings with the arrows are associated with a game Helldivers 2, again, a popular game co-opted by white nationalists. So we'll find out a bit more. We also know that Tyler Robinson, the alleged shooter, was terminally online, and for Halloween, he went as Pepe the Frog, the icon of the Groypers. So there's a lot there, a lot we're going to uncover. But there was also a lot there with Charlie Kirk, David, and I want to step back for a second because I posted this last night. I posted, by the way, last night, and I posted a lot. Hey, MAGA, you better be careful because we still don't have the shooter. We don't have the suspect. And this shooter could be a radicalized right winger, much like the shooter who tried to kill Trump. What then? Well, we're going to find out now. But what I also said last night with the idolization of Charlie Kirk, David, because I don't know if you watch football like I do. They did a moment of silence before the Commanders game, a moment of remembrance before the Yankees game. Ezra Klein's piece, Axios' piece, J.D. Vance flew with his body. Usha Vance, held his wife's hand. My wife, who doesn't know anything about this stuff, thank God, she goes, I didn't know anything about Charlie Kirk. I saw more about Charlie Kirk than Jimmy Carter dying. I was like, who is this man? He must be a saint. And then I read about him. I'm like, oh my God. And so I posted this yesterday, David. You're getting a clear x-ray of America right now. Look at who this country's powerful institutions choose to elevate, venerate, and celebrate. Look at the double standards and look at the people who adore Charlie Kirk and then spend 5 minutes reviewing his hateful legacy. This is America. Your response.
I think that's right. I mean, this is a guy who, as I said earlier, tried to destroy the republic, as did many Republicans and many conservatives and many MAGA people with Trump after the 2020 election, and he's been out there, exacerbating political tensions and divides, using hateful rhetoric quite purposefully, loud and proudly. So I think that there's nothing wrong with us referring to it, and the fact, you know, what did Trump and how did the Republican Party treat the terrible shootings in Minnesota? Did we have flyovers in football games? Did we have, people calling for flags to be at half-mast for these public servants who were killed, assassinated by, a right-winger in Minnesota? Yeah, they were Democrats. They didn't get this. Um,
He didn't even call Melissa Hortman's family.
yeah, no, no. I mean, Trump had, and when he was asked, "Are you going to call Governor Tim Walz just to convey your condolences?" He goes, "Why would I? Why waste my time?" I mean, so, this is, but we're living in an authoritarian society, and which Trump and his gang are running a political culture war, and we see, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, decent Democrats, they came out there with statements about Charlie Kirk, saying this was horrendous and expressing sorrow and expressing sympathy for his family, even despite his past of hateful rhetoric and trying to subvert American democracy. But you don't see that reciprocated on the other side. Um, there's an imbalance here because basically Trump wants to use political violence from his own side and wants to use the threat of political violence from the other side in order to suppress it. That's what an authoritarian does. Um, not all of them have, private militias, but some do, and they certainly are, like to wink and nod to those people out there who are willing to do violence on their behalf. So that's exactly what Trump is doing now. It's not at all surprising, and let's I'll end this passage on this. I don't think enough Democrats get it. This is
I
a
agree.
this is a battle. They are demonizing you. And yeah, I don't identify as a Democrat, but I'm left of center, obviously. They're demonizing us because they want to, eradicate us. I don't mean that necessarily physically, although who knows, um, from American society. And if someone tells you that they think you're evil and they want to destroy you, my first piece of advice is believe them. Believe them and make your assumptions and base your behavior and conduct from there on that assumption. Okay? You're not going to talk them out of it. You're unlikely to find common ground with someone who thinks that you're trying to destroy their way of life. And so figure out what that means for you and your political desires and your political project and your political aims. We and I think this moment, particularly as you just described it, illuminates where we're at here.
I appreciate that sentiment. It takes me to the next topic that I really want to talk about because you teased it out. Is I agree with you. These folks, I'm talking about MAGA, Trump, and now the mainstream of the Republican Party, not just the fringe, have openly told you in the past 2 days, but even beforehand, that they consider the rest of us to be enemies. They consider the rest of us to be traitors. They consider the rest of us to be invaders. The language of Stephen Miller. They and think the rest of us are terrorists. They believe they're at war. Wired magazine, the last 2 days, has done the coverage and has collated all of the statements by mainstream MAGA influencers where they're using language of warfare, civil war. It's on, game time. Donald Trump said it, right? Stephen Miller, that friendly, kind, gentle man, has openly said that it's the leftists who are insurrectionists. He's using the word insurrection. He's used the word invasion. He says that we're at war right now with immigrants, which is why he invoked the Alien Enemies Act. Donald Trump, as you know, David, cannot run again. That has not stopped him from selling 2028 merch. As you know, Donald Trump is now openly asking Republicans to find him 100 seats, and Republicans are saying, yes, sir. Texas followed, Missouri's also following. That means slowly by surely, every single red state with red leadership is going to gerrymander. Donald Trump in the morning today again spread lies about mail in ballots, mail in voting, which he has used again. He has also unleashed the National Guard against the American people. He has unleashed the National Guard, armed guards right here, 20 minutes away from us in Washington, D.C. He has unleashed ICE agents and National Guard in the military against folks in L.A. Is threatening to do it in Chicago, and today he'll do it against Memphis. And then also he changed the Department of Defense, the Department of War, unilaterally killed 11 people who the New York Times said were on a boat and turning around, but he killed them without any evidence. And J.D. Vance, when confronted, said, "Hey, this was a war crime." He said, "I don't give a shit." Now, David, I don't want to be an alarmist either, but I look at the evidence before me. I trust the evidence of my eyes and my ears. And I listen to Donald Trump and I listen to Stephen Miller and I take them, David, literally and seriously. And connecting the dots, David, to me, it is very clear that they do not intend on giving up power. They are perfectly fine using and abusing the military to crack skulls. And they are perfectly fine promoting conspiracy theories. In fact, David, I'm old enough to remember that Donald Trump incited a violent insurrection to stay in power on January 6, 2021. And he has since pardoned those insurrectionists, including the violent ones. And he has also made into a martyr Ashley Babbitt, another violent insurrectionist who was radicalized by QAnon. So
It's getting
taking
worse.
this all together,
It may get worse. In this, they are now the J6 people who are pardoned are now filing for reparations, and
yeah,
they will find sympathetic ears within the Justice Department, and it could end up that Donald Trump ends up paying these insurrectionists thousands of dollars each.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's another data point that I keep in my mind. Ashley Babbitt, folks, your taxpayer dollars, 5 million, have gone to her family. She was given this amazing send off last week, right? A gold plated coffin, right? That memorial in D.C. And furthermore, some of these insurrectionists, David, are now part of the Trump administration. So, David, again, I just look at the facts, David. And you and me have been in this a long time. You've been in a bit longer, but you're still very young and vibrant. Um, to me, I agree with exactly what you said. And Ari Berman, your fantastic colleague in Mother Jones, I had him on with his fantastic piece a couple of days ago. He echoed what you and I are saying, and he said the Democrats need to fight in 2026, not on policy, but for the opportunity to even have more elections. That's what 2026 is about. And he said this is like an authoritarian project, if we will even have more elections. But he agreed with me and you in that they are not, if you will, they need a wartime conciliary, if I may use Godfather. And I don't see that fight. I don't see that framing. And I don't see people raising the alarm despite all the evidence I just laid out before our audience. David.
Yeah, I think I've been saying this since January 20th. The Democrats have not created a counter narrative that is as powerful as Trump's own narrative, whether it was, remaking government and, getting, the whole government efficiency and Doge and, and going up, common sense policies, all this sort of stuff. He had a very clear narrative. It was based on falsehoods and lies, but it was a clear narrative. And the Democrats end up fighting either individual battles where they come out and they say, "Hey, we have 80 policy position papers that show that we're better for you than the Republicans." They look at page 23, paragraph B of our housing plan, and it just, I mean, I wish these things mattered, but in today's arena, they don't. And I've been around way too long, and I've watched too many cycles of Democrats, having this boring debate. Should we go more to the center? Should we go more to the left? How do we reach this group? How do we reach white working class people in the suburb of Cleveland, Ohio? Do we have to dump this? Do we have to dump that? I mean, I think that what we have now is not an ideological contest in this country. The question is fight or not fight.
I agree.
That's really any I think Mamdani, if he had sort of more conservative policies, but still got out there the way he's gone out there and talked about kicking ass, taking control and say, and I'm going to address your concerns, which is kind of what Trump did in a way. um, People would say, okay, they're not looking. I don't think people are looking for a lefty candidate. I don't think they're looking even for, a conservative candidate. Some people are, but most Americans, I think, are not, or they can be persuaded against their natural ideological inclinations. They want someone who, if they think things are not going the right way, who will shake things up and fight like hell for them. And if they're concerned about democracy, or if they're concerned about affordability and cost, and the cost of living issues. They're worried about the decline of our public health system, or basically blowing up our whole scientific infrastructure, whatever it may be that they're worried about. They want to see someone who they have faith in, who is going to try to do something, and that means usually knocking heads or using sharp elbows. And I'm not talking about lying. I'm not talking about making shit up. I'm not talking about being, using violence or doing anything unfair, but demonstrating fight.
That's right.
I mean, Bill Clinton used to say that strong and wrong beats weak and right. So they don't think you're strong enough, and you're going to be a strong enough advocate for them, then they're not going to be interested in your policy papers. This is not, especially when it gets to the president, it's not a job interview. It's not a job interview. It's a boxing match. And that sounds, I wish it weren't, but that's how, politics is 80% performance, because you're asking someone to choose you to be their leader. It's kind of an emotional action as well. So,
Absolutely.
who's going to lead your tribe, your position, your view? Who's going to be community? Who you can trust? And and the Democrats, just think they can nip at Trump here, and he's bad on healthcare, so all we have to do is think about how to beat them on healthcare. I mean, that's a big vulnerability, but it's not the big picture. And so now they're going to get swamped with the Charlie Kirk thing. They're going to be accused of inciting violence, and they're causing deaths like this. And if they're not out there saying, no, you're the fascist, and I don't mean that little Spider-Man.
They're not out there, David. I don't know if you saw Schumer and Jeffries. They had an opportunity to connect the dots. They failed already. The only two Democrats that I saw actually say that, Elizabeth Warren, when she was confronted without prepared statements, she said it. Pritzker had a good statement. I think Newsom was okay, but Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, nope, did not connect the dots, did not flip it, did not bring the receipts, and did not have the fighter spirit. I agree with you, David. I think, and you said something about Trump, which I think it's spot on. He ran. He's terrible. It's a piece of shit. It's all lies. Doesn't matter. It's about the story, the narrative, the emotions. He ran as an anti-establishment outsider who would be a bulldozer, right? That's what he
Yep.
ran on. And a lot of people like that. And a lot of people who voted for him also would have voted for Bernie Sanders. Then in 2024, a lot of people voted for Donald Trump. Guess who they also voted for, folks? AOC. Now we found out that a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump in 2024 also support Zohran Mamdani, an anti-establishment economic populist message that says, you know what, America's effed up, the institutions are corrupt, we need something new, we need something fresh, we need to fight. Zohran comes in as a democratic socialist. A lot of people are like, I don't give a shit about democratic socialist, Democrat, liberal, whatever. I don't care about these titles. I don't care about these institutions. Just make my life better. Take on the establishment, be authentic, be sincere, and fight. Just fight. But David, I want to ask you this. The reason why I think there's a civil war in the Democratic Party, and that's what the word I've used, a cold civil war that no one's mentioned, is you see Hakeem Jeffries and Senator Schumer, instead of having this fight against Donald Trump, instead of using the words fascism, instead of, going against them and being bold, they've spent that energy to take out Zoran Mamdani. And I believe I mean, literally, and this guy, poll after poll after poll, just came out, that New York Times
Yeah, I
Siena poll. I
I
mean,
mean, this is, and I referenced, my age a few moments ago and talking about how there's
a
always
young
this
32-year-old David Corn.
there- there's always this, perennial fight in the Democratic Party about going to left or to right, and this happened with groups like the Democratic Leadership Council that Bill Clinton was ahead of, and going up against Jesse Jackson in the '80s and '90s. I mean, this is always ongoing, and to me, it's like, let fucking Democrats be fucking Democrats. By that I mean, if you come from Wyoming and you're winning as a Democrat there, okay, you're going to be a different Democrat than Mamdani in New York. And and what should unite them, is not necessarily every position, but should be their general framework and how they approach politics and who it is they think they're helping, and working for. And a party can be big enough to include people who disagree on even whether there should be free bus rides or not in New York City. And particularly when the wolf's not at the door in terms of authoritarianism, the wolf is inside the house. And, and at the control panel, the Democrats don't have the luxury of this navel gazing, you know, perennial jerk off they have about whether the party should be more left or more right. This is, this is a break glass moment. It's been this way
That's right.
actually for a couple of years now. And so, okay, you don't like Mom Donnie, he's too left for you. Big fucking deal. Boo hoo hoo. It's two Democrats of New York who are a big constituency in the party. They give a lot of money to not just Democratic politicians, of politicians across the country. If this is who they went with, you suck it up. And you can even say, too left for me, but okay, let's see what he does. You don't have to come out there and hug him. You don't have to endorse everything he's ever done. And the idea that they're being, playing footsie because they're worried that Donald Trump is going to use this to call them socialists. Well, guess what? It's going to happen anyway. You can't stop that. He is the Democratic voters of New York created this situation. You can't get rid of them because then you have no voters, at least in New York. So they do this. Your obligation is to make the best of it. Some people want to celebrate it, like Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, and that's fine. Others are not so happy about it. Okay, I can understand that. But then you don't get out there and sabotage them and create the civil war. You say we have bigger fish to fry. The enemy is, this is the whole. Don't they watch Game of Thrones? Don't they watch Game of Thrones? It's all about these rivalries having to come together to save the kingdom when winter comes from the zombies,
From
right?
literally the White Walkers,
The what?
literally the White Walkers, who have said that they think you are pedophiles, devil worshippers, invaders. They think you're enemies. They want to wipe you out. They want to drive you out. They're inciting literally their base to commit violence against you. As of this week, they're talking about civil war. And you're sitting there saying, no, well, I don't know. Let me think about policy. And did you know that Zoran Mamdani did not condemn a chant that he never used? Hmm. How?
I
It's
mean, they're, they're
about our
falling.
democracy, David. It's about our democracy.
They're falling into the trap that the right always sets here, and it's and this if you have a big story, which is what Trump does, everything that happens, you you try to connect to the big story to advance the big story, and if you can't do that, you ignore it. Or you
True.
shove it to the side, or you suppress it, or you say, it's not a big deal. It's not part of my story here. I don't care. Let other people worry about that. And if the Democrats had a big story and Mandami comes along and some of them want to include in the story and some don't, that's fine. But to now make that, a priority issue, um, and basically tell the Democratic voters, your base, that you don't respect their decision and that you don't feel, and that you don't that they should not be welcomed within the party. Uh, to me, just regardless of principle, it just seems idiotic. It seems tactically and strategically idiotic. You
Political
know,
malpractice. Political
sometimes
malpractice.
sometimes in a political party, you get saddled with someone who you'd rather not see. Look what happened with the Democrats. Now, with the Republicans. Now, I think, if someone goes too far and crosses the line, as I think Trump did, the principal Republicans, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger and others say that's too much for me. I can't do that. He tried to destroy the republic. Now, most Republicans still hung on to him because they turned into a cult. But I think in general, people leave parties all the time if they go too far afield for them. But right now, you got those White Walkers breathing down the door, uh, and they want to eradicate and annihilate you. And so, getting into a to do, a fuss over a mayoral candidate, even in a city as big as important as New York, is not helpful. I mean, every day, they should wake up and say, and this is what Trump does, I think, and I think the people around him do. Every day they wake up and they say, how do we advance the ball? By inches, by feet, by yards. How do we do it today? What is today? What is the message today? What is the disinformation? What is the propaganda we're going to do today? What is the lie we're going to tell today? Or what is the PR stunt we're going to do today to advance our interests? And you don't see the Democrats doing that. I'm not saying they should be putting out lies and propaganda and disinformation, but in a principled way, what is the game plan for today? What are we doing today to thwart the rise of authoritarianism, to try to advance our agenda and more or less tell our own story? They don't do that, and so they get overwhelmed by the Charlie Kirk assassination. They don't know how to navigate it. A few do, but many don't. They don't know how to navigate Mamdani. We're going to see them. I hope we saw this a few months ago. I hope it doesn't repeat itself. Get tied up into knots over the government shutdown that may or may not be coming. The Republicans might save Trump's butt by just kicking us down the road a few months. We don't know. It's you know
Well,
it's frustrating, but I have to say it's utterly, utterly not surprising.
it's not surprising, but they have to evolve. I have said they're not built for this fight. They're not made for this moment. And just to give you an example of how Trump and Republicans are so good and so shameless, I've never encountered. How do you shame shameless people? I've never encountered a more shameless political movement in my lifetime. But just today, after Tyler Robinson what became the suspect in the shooting of Charlie Kirk, all right, I'm just giving you an example, an exact quote of what of Donald Trump said. All right. My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. How are you holding up? A reporter asked Donald Trump. This is what he said, David. I think very
Hold on a
good.
second. Just hold on a
I
second. For some reason, my iPad started playing music by itself. Go ahead.
All right, and this is how he responded. My condolences on the loss of your friend Charlie Kirk. How are you holding up? The reporter asked Donald Trump. I think very good. And by the way, you see all the trucks? They started construction on the new ballroom for the White House. Um, that was Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump, then as David said, he goes, I don't care. When it came to confronting violence or right wing violence, they're already now blaming colleges and universities instead. And what happened with Vance Bolter when it was identified that he, the white MAGA Trump voter, was the killer of Melissa Hortman, had a hit list of 70 liberals. You know what happened? They didn't talk about it. Mouse farts. When it was announced that it was a white Republican shooter who tried to assassinate Donald Trump, you know what happened? Mouse farts. They moved on. And what I've been saying, David, for the past 2 days is what will happen if we find out that the suspect, we didn't know, and we still are finding out more information, ends up being a white man radicalized by the MAGA movement. Oh, I don't know, the Groypers. And everyone said they will ignore it and move on and still call Democrats rapists and criminals and invaders. And meanwhile, you still do not have a coordinated message or battle plan from the Democrats, even as Donald Trump has his 2028 hat as he's unleashing the National Guard, as he openly with Zelensky. I remember you saw this a couple of weeks ago when he was caught Well, not caught. He said it openly. Oh, is that true? Oh, you don't have elections during war? Oh, that might be good. Okay. He said that and everyone else laughed. I'm like, why is everyone laughing? They're telling you their Bond supervillain plot. I'm going to bring in another pop cultural reference. You and I have seen Bond movies. The supervillain in the last act generally monologues. These are the supervillains finding James Bond in the first 10 minutes and saying, hey, are you James Bond? I'm the supervillain. Do you want my? I have a slideshow about my plot. It's called Project 2025. Do you want some video and audio slides? And speaking about Game of Thrones, we are literally dealing with the White Walkers who are coming to kill all of us: centrists, liberals, democratic socialists, press, uh, doctors, anyone who's not MAGA. And you would think that they would unite, but instead we're a bunch of reeks. And here's a moment, David, you might appreciate this. At the end of the day, Reek, Theon, Theon the Reek, a man whose name was Reek because he was so broken down, so weak. At the end, Reek found himself again. He found honor, he found pride, and he became Theon Greyjoy. And Reek picked up the sword, spoiler alert, and said, you know what? I'm not going to die as Reek. I'm going to die honorably. I'm going to fight and defend the future King Bran against the undead, against the White Walkers. And spoiler alert, that's how Theon went down. Not as Reek, but as Theon, the man who defended Bran, and then Bran survived, and they were able to kill the White Walkers. Spoiler alert. We need these Reeks to become Theon again, David. And I don't know what you and I can do. We've tried our best. The last thing I want to ask you real quick, I kept you a bit longer, but we have so many hearts for you, David. David loves these hearts. Every time he speaks, he sees the hearts. He goes, oh, you like me. You really like me. I have to ask you this because you've been in the game for a while. Last night, it was revealed that David Ellison, the son of Larry Ellison, one of the wealthiest people on earth, is now running Paramount thanks to the merger. Paramount owns CBS. We also found out that Paramount CBS are finalizing deals to give $200 million to Barry Weiss's press, which is absurd overevaluation. Barry Weiss is allegedly going to come on and then overlook CBS. Now they're making a bid for Warner Brothers Discovery, which means that if this bid goes through, this was a scoop by Oliver Darcy last night, Warner Brothers Discovery folks also own CNN and HBO and Warner Brothers and DC movies. David, your take about all this.
Yeah, I think it's highly worrisome. I mean, there's obviously the news component of CNN, and control of CNN and control of CBS. Two major networks is not a good thing almost for anybody. I mean, regardless of ideology, we want networks and news organizations to be owned and run by different sets of people, so that there's more diversity in views and approaches, ideological and non-ideological approaches to how to cover things. So I think that would be a setback for our information ecosystem. Warner Brothers, you don't need to hear it from me, but has had a lot of difficulties in the last few years trying to figure out who and what it is, and the movie studio. They still managed to turn out some pretty good stuff. The Superman movie was good. I thought it had a good.
I thought it was really good.
I thought it had a good message, which was basically just be kind. Don't be a fucker. Just be kind to people. And war is bad. Just people who start wars are not good people, and try not to start wars. And HBO Max, turns out great stuff. I'm just finishing watching The Pit. And The Penguin was great. Hacks was good. They're still doing good stuff, but conglomeration in the entertainment world and the news world tends to, be bad. It cuts down on competition, both creative competition and business competition, and putting it in the hands of, of one guy, David Ellison, and Larry Ellison, who are, certainly right of center, if not pro-Trump.
Very
Is
pro-Trump, MAGA, right of center, hard right,
yeah,
pro-Israel supporters.
yeah,
And also Larry Ellison's kind of nutty and thinks he shouldn't die and he deserves to live forever. But I digress.
Listen, I'd be very happy if all the billionaires out there spent millions of dollars figuring out how to freeze their heads and last forever and leave the rest of us alone. You go, yeah, let us know when you work something out on that front, and just and fine, go do that rather than buy newspapers and
I'd rather them go to space. I'm like, you just go to space. Have fun.
yeah,
Go on your
just
rocket to space.
yes, do the space thing. It's fun to watch things go up. Don't come work in the White House. Don't buy the Washington Post. Just do space. That's fun. Who doesn't like space? You can hang out with Gail King, in
And Katy
orbiting
Perry.
gravity, whatever it is. Buy another yacht. It will put people at work in shipyards. Okay, fine. Just leave the rest of us alone. Um, so yeah, so this is a pretty bad thing. I remember back in the '80s, and I was at the Nation magazine. We worried about media conglomeration and the national entertainment state. You know, TV studios buying other studios, or big corporations buying studios or TV things, and like you can look at CBS when it was owned by the Paley, well, run by Paley and owned by a family, they put on documentaries because there was a point of pride for them. We have a network, we have a news division, we do documentaries. Now, they're not going to bring in as much money, perhaps, as a Matlock episode, but we see this as part of our overall mission. And, that has obviously degraded over the decades as, news divisions have become part of corporate entities run by bean counters. And the more layers of corporate ownership, I think the more the principles of journalism, or the principles of creative independent creativity, are going to be squeezed out. So this is not a good thing.
This is what's happened in Hungary. This is what's happened in Russia. This is what's happened in Turkey. This is what's happened in India. The consolidation of media by the authoritarian's rich friend, the oligarchy, the
No,
oligarchy
no.
taking over. In Hungary, they did that. They purged the judiciary, they purged the colleges, and they purged the media. And now it's authoritarian rule. It's happening in real time, and you're seeing all these corporate media bend the knee in the most shameful way, folks. It's really dangerous. And
Which,
Ellison,
which
it's
is
not.
yeah, which is exactly why all the thousands of people out there watching us should make sure that they subscribe to you, which they probably do,
Thank you.
otherwise they wouldn't know about this, and that they subscribe to me, at davidcorn.com, but also read Mother Jones and the New Republic and the American Prospect, and find other sources. I mean, Substack is great now and is very wonderful, but there are still really great magazines and news outfits out there that deserve and warrant support. Um, I mean, what you do is great. I have the best of both worlds. Worlds. I do a newsletter myself, but also am part of a newsroom at Mother Jones that does the type of reporting and work that I or really probably couldn't do on our own. So I mean, people, I don't know if we can, we can't stop these corporations because Trump's FCC is going to love all this sort of stuff,
Yeah.
but we just have to keep finding ways of supporting independent journalism, even as small as it might be compared to these monoliths. And I'll just I'll just toot my own horn to show how it can make a difference. People may not remember, but oh my goodness, 13 years ago,
Mm,
I broke the story that Mitt Romney
Romney.
had, denigrated 47% of the population, saying they didn't want to work and they were freeloaders who just wanted to have the government take care of them. And, that was a major event in that campaign. And that was not, didn't come from corporate journalism or conglomerate, came from Mother Jones and from the newsroom that I was running at the time, where we had done a whole series of stories that actually led to us finding that tape. So it's very important to be out there, and as you worry about journalism, to find journalistic entities that you can and should support, and that really means with money, subscribing, signing up for newsletters, whatever they want you to do.
And David's reporting was so fantastic, and that many people say really sunk Romney's chances. So we need investigative reporting. We need reporters, commentators, journalists who refuse to bend the knee, who say the accurate words, who call out fascism for fascism, who use words like white supremacy, racism. People who are dogged, trying to get justice and accountability for all the women who were raped by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Folks, please support independent journalists. Support David, his fantastic work at Mother Jones, his newsletter, shamelessly promoting your newsletter. And then once he says it, give him all the hearts. David.
It's called Our Land. It comes out twice a week. A lot of politics, media, and cultural coverage about Superman and other things like that. So you can sign up for a free trial subscription at davidcorn.com. And if you like it, I hope you sign up for the premium version because that's the only way we keep this going. If we have people will pay us a little bit for it.
Folks, this has been the Left Hook. I think I'll be back in 5 or 6 minutes. Allison Gill of Mother She Wrote wants to speak. And I think I'm sub-hosting for Mary Trump today at 6 p.m., also independent. And Don Lemon just invited me at 5 p.m. So we'll be busy all day. I am tired, but who needs sleep? It's a slow Friday, David. And for the 2,000 people who have joined us, I really strongly recommend listening to this conversation where David breaks down this great piece he had. I thought I was shouting in the wild. I felt like it was the world's worst Twilight Zone episode, where David brought out all the receipts and said, "Hey, you can condemn Charlie Kirk's murder and also talk about his hateful legacy and the fact that he supported the insurrection and how he helped radicalize all these people who are now part and parcel of the mainstream that are threatening the rest of us. You can do both. And hey, Ezra Klein and others, you don't have to sanitize and whitewash this man's legacy. You can do both, condemn the murder and also accurately describe what Charlie Kirk is and what he represented, which sadly now is in the White House in the form of Donald Trump. And again, folks, when it comes to Donald Trump, when asked today on Fox News, as David brought up at the top, hey, Donald Trump, what can we do to fix this country and come together? His exact words, I couldn't care less. That's what we're dealing with, folks. So we talk about all that, plus the weakness and fickleness of the Democratic leadership and also corporate media and how it could do better. It'll be up later today on my Substack. I'll send it over to David. He can share it, folks. It's a Left Hook. No paywalls ever. If you have a few bucks, give it to David. If you have a few bucks left over, give it to me. I have 800 kids, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Take care of yourself. Be kind. Be informed. Rest, be joyful warriors, and don't be a fascist. Thank you, David.
Thank you. See you
Look
soon.
at all the hearts you got. Look at all the hearts. Take care.